But having said that, we're going to move on to our next panel, Customer Experience and Digital Retailing Trends. This will be an interesting panel because in the U.S., we have one company in particular that's really bucking the system, and that's Tesla. And I'm curious to see how our panel deals with this story. I'm going to introduce Jorge Eurán, the CEO of Alveni. He's going to lead this discussion, and he will introduce our panelists. Jorge.
Thank you, Bruce, and good morning, everyone. This is a very interesting panel. Today we have Gerardo Gómez right here with me. He's a General Director and Country Manager for J.D. Power Mexico. And virtually we have two more guests, Guillermo Prieto, Executive President of the Mexican Association of Automotive Dealers. Hi, Guillermo. And finally, Stewart Stropp, Senior Director of Automotive Retail for J.D. Power. Good morning, Stewart.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. So anyway, we've all experienced in the last couple of years a big change in the retail practices in the automotive industry. So this panel specifically is going to talk about it. And I think it's going to be very, the trends that we're experiencing. We can find the new way of buying cars with companies that offer online, experiences, photographs, videos, and all the new stuff that the new customers are trying to see before buying a car, which makes the experience, the overall experience, changed. So let's start with the questions. And a study by Cox Automotive in 2020 found that 74% of the franchise dealers' customers are using more these digital retailing tools that I was talking about. And I guess that's part of the pandemic specifically. Test drive home delivery, the vehicle, when they purchase it, it's delivered also at home. And finally, one very interesting one is that, and this has been coming up from years before, but people go and do the online credit applications and they're ready to buy the car instead of getting the application checked while going to the dealership. So all these trends are basically new. Stewart, I think this is something for you. Can this trend completely change the way people are going to keep buying cars in the future? Will we see this continuously even after COVID? What do you think?
Yeah, I do think this advent of digital retail, it definitely is changing the experience. There's no question about it. I don't know that it's completely changing the way that dealerships work, at least not yet. I mean, you do still have the same inputs for a car deal. You do still have price. You still have trade-in valuation, F&I, accessories, taxes, fees, and so on. So those are still in place. What is changing though is how the customer is providing those inputs and how the dealer is collecting them, and then in turn also how those inputs are being shared back from the dealer to the customer. Historically, this was all done in a brick and mortar setting in a physical dealership. Over time, more customers started completing some of these activities with dealers on the phone, through email, more recently through text. Texting continues to be a critical communication tool moving forward. And now, of course, to your point, especially with the onset of COVID, more and more of this path to purchase is being completed through a digital retail platform, online, or through a set of digital retail tools integrated into the dealership's website. So the medium is certainly changing and shifting, while some of those fundamental parts of the process stay the same. I do think, though, as we see this shift in the medium, we're seeing some positive effects in terms of more transparency for customers and in turn, more satisfaction in the experience from customers. We do see this in the data, in the sales satisfaction index that we publish in the U.S. When you look at 5 of those key sales activities, the agreement on price, the trade-in valuation, the credit approval, as you mentioned, reviewing F&I products, and then completing paperwork. In the case of all 5 of those key activities, satisfaction scores for customers who are able to do those things online are 30 points higher than they are for customers who are not. So I definitely think we are seeing a pretty strong ROI story in that sense. And that's important, obviously, because satisfaction ultimately drives future sales through intended loyalty and positive word of mouth. But there's also a more, I think, direct ROI story that we're seeing develop around digital retail as well, just in terms of the financials. When you look at for instance, the F&I close rates for things like selling maintenance plans and extended warranties, tire and wheel protection, paint and rust protection, accessories, of course. But for all those products and services, close rates are higher for customers who are able to view information about those products and services online versus those who are not. So, not only is the comfort and the convenience and the empowerment of digital retail leading to higher satisfaction, we're also seeing data now about how it can drive higher sales penetration, and it can drive higher close rates. And as we continue to see that part of the story unfold, I think that's when you'll really start to see more and more dealerships actively embracing digital retail and offering digital retail options to their customers. We're also starting to hear from more dealers about how digital retail is reducing their labor burden per transaction. And, obviously that just improves the gross profit equation even more. As if dealers are seeing that they are able to close more deals more efficiently and with lower operational costs through digital retail, obviously more and more dealers are going to want to do that. So, I don't think, digital retail is completely changing how dealerships work, but it certainly is, I think, kind of changing the game in terms of making it significantly easier and more convenient, more satisfying for customers. And it's also making that process potentially more efficient for all parties, assuming that the team at the dealership is trained and equipped to keep that process going forward with the customer as they transition from online into the dealership and everywhere in between and back and forth, and not kind of inadvertently trip up that flow and ask the customer to start over, which does happen. I think that's one of the key opportunities at the retail level, is to ensure that the retail teams and the frontline personnel are kind of keeping that path to purchase always moving forward and not starting over. But assuming that does happen, then digital retail, I think, can bring a lot of positives to the equation and definitely can contribute to this ongoing evolution that we see in the car buying experience.
Great. Guillermo, what do you think about the dealerships in Mexico? Do you think they're getting into this digital trend? Are they, getting their websites ready? They're getting their marketing online, as Stewart was saying?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Jorge, I want to thank Mexico Now and also to share this roundtable with Gerardo and Stewart. In the case of Mexico, what we have been seeing, well, it's a different market, a very competitive one, and of course, I agree that the business model, from our point of view, was already changing towards having a better customer experience, and the pandemic, as you were mentioning, accelerated all these things. And specifically, dealers are concerned that that model was changing, but that was not going to change that fast. And in Mexico, we have groups that have only one dealer, or other groups that may have 150 dealers. So there's a wide difference of situations in terms of how they manage their business and how they interact with the customer. We have very sophisticated dealers, and on the other side, some old-style dealers still using these carton things in order to receive the cars for service. But what is clear, and I wanted to mention that, is that it is clear that the pandemic accelerated this change in terms of digitalization and also in social networks, which were already starting moving slowly, but this really big, and the idea in that case was to boost sales anyway. The problem is that the market in Mexico has been going down since 2016, when we sold 1.6 million cars, and with the pandemic last year, we sold 950,000. So there's a huge decline in the market, right. And that, of course, with the pandemic, got very fragile the situation of the dealers. And from the sanitary regulations, by March of last year, I would say that the sale floors of the dealers were not considered essential in terms for the sanitary authorities. And so we had to close the floors, and that caused that even more the dealers started to use these digital and social networks in order to sell and in order to bring the cars home and so on and so forth.
Right.
And the problem is that experience changed the way Mexicans were used to buy cars, but there was no alternative. If you wanted one, you needed to start going through these alternative mechanisms. So these terms of new ways of selling now are a priority. Everybody's trying to work as fast as possible in order to achieve better sales, taking into consideration the fragile situation that we've been going through. What was considered essential, and this is important to mention, is the fact that after sales shops and repair workshops that didn't close, so that maintained regular income that kept the dealers operating at some point. And then after 3 or 4 months, the floors started to open. So one of the things that we have been mentioned to the authorities was the fact that it was more dangerous to go to a convenience store, and that was considered essential, rather than getting into the sales floor, where, considering the situation of the market, practically nobody was there.
Right.
So yes, I think the study is going forward, and as it was already mentioned by Stewart, but we are going to have to move faster, taking into consideration what we've been living through in the last practically couple of years.
Thank you, Guillermo. Gerardo, you want to add something to that?
Yes, thank you, Jorge. Hello, Stewart, Guillermo. Nice to see you at the distance. Well, basically, I just want to highlight a little bit that technology adoption that is happening. This digital process needs to happen. This is just one slide that I have, that all the things that has to happen in order just to buy a car. But what we've been thinking here is that this technology come here to stay. And if we don't have this digital assessment on their own dealerships, it's going to be hard just to keep the pace for what the new customers are looking for. We need to understand that the new customers, the younger customers, start buying vehicles and they want a different style. And now that the pandemic pushed us in order just to move faster into a digital world, this is something that everybody, the new customers mainly, are going to start looking as to this kind of process, to this kind. And the big risk here is that if the dealerships come back to the old style, old school way of doing business, then it's going to start losing all these younger customers that could push it away from the business. So that's the things that now that we do this big, we make this big step, now there's no way back, right? So we have just to keep on moving on to digital activities. But again, the dealers has to understand where are their situation now and analyze their own self and how well I'm doing in all these steps that are here. And as well, not only for selling vehicles, also for how we are going to attend all the dealerships, all the service vehicles that are coming into the floor just to be serviced, and how we can capitalize that technology into this kind of activities.
So it would be safe to say that the first point of contact has changed from just going to the dealership directly to online seeking, information, comparing cars, all that stuff, and then going to the dealership just for a final decision. Stewart, do you want to, jump in on this?
Yeah, thank you, Jorge. There's no question that initial touch point has changed dramatically. I think we're already very much in a state of the market where most people are starting their car buying experience online and doing a lot of research online. And in fact, another study that we publish around the automotive shopping experience, specifically that pre-sale window for customers, shows us that, on average, it takes about 13 weeks for customers to work their way through the path to purchase, from when they start researching vehicles out to when they take delivery of that vehicle. What we're seeing is customers on average aren't visiting a dealership until about halfway through that process. So you've got the full first half of their shopping experience that's conducted remotely, completely outside of the dealership, largely through the website, also through these other communication points we talked about with email and phone and text. So yes, Jorge, absolutely critically important and very accurate and correct that that online experience and that initial touch point has completely changed. And that's why it's so critical to Gerardo's point, right, that, dealerships be so proactive and aggressive about embracing those technologies.
And they don't go back, as you were saying, to old practices, right? So let's move to a different question, specifically for Guillermo. And you were talking about, the dealerships in Mexico during the pandemic, but in the next 5 years, how would the practices of the retailers in Mexico versus the U.S. would compare? What do you say is going to change in that, specifically the retailers, the auto retailers in Mexico versus the U.S.?
Well, it seems to me that taking into consideration the sizes of the market and talking about the change in the business model and the way customers approach the dealers, in the case of Mexico, and it is clear that what Stewart was mentioning, these people know more about the car when they get to the floor of the dealer than the people of the sales force in the dealership. So my perception is that in the next 5 years, well, there are a lot of factors that have to be taken into consideration, which will bring us different scenarios. First of all, what will happen with the Mexican economy? Our market is very sensitive to the economic conditions. Actually, it anticipates that if economic growth is not going to be relevant, it has not been for many years, then I see very difficult that the market may recover as fast as we can. And we have two areas what we consider fundamental for the development of the internal market. This is economic growth. This is also confidence. And there are two specific factors that differentiate our market. In one of them, basically, which is that our market is also sensitive, and we are now in the middle of these discussions to legalize the cars that come from the United States and that they are considered scratch. No?
Right.
Actually, in 2005, the border was open, and the cars that enter Mexico were cars that could not transit in the U.S., and they were sent to Mexico illegally. Actually, it was around 70% more of illegal cars in 1 year from the cars that the dealers sold. So this point of the movements of illegal cars between the border with Mexico and the United States, it's very important. And that will affect, as we are threatened now by the government, that probably the president may announce during this weekend in the border that he is going to propose a program to legalize what is illegal, no? Which is inconsistent in that regard, and that may affect us even more, the situation. Okay. In 2016, when we sold the 1.6 million cars, we thought that by 2021, we were going to reach our potential. And we made different studies that Mexico could sell around 2 million cars per year. And we are going to sell around 1 million. So it's half of what we have expected. Okay. And the other issue is financing, which it's also another boost for the sales of cars. In Mexico, it is like 7 years ago, 40% of the cars were financed, and now it's 60%. But our potential is 80%, in order to get to the points where we want to get. Okay. In that regard, the problem with finance in Mexico is that the interest rates, as a difference from what is going on in the United States, and taking into consideration the sizes of the economy, in Mexico, the interest rates of financing cars is very expensive. Yes. And not only because now inflation has been going up a little bit, and the interest rates have been going up also as well. The problem is that in order to recover, if someone doesn't pay the rent, you have to go through a very difficult legal and judicial process, which takes a lot of time to recover your car if you are the financer. So that they include in the interest rate that risk of not having your car as soon as possible to bring it back. So the markets are different. What we have to work, from my point of view, is that as the model is changing and that we have a new free trade agreement, to try to work together in order to see what is going on, what was mentioned at the beginning in terms of the examples in Europe, and also to change, as we were saying, in the business model. We cannot still have the sizes of the dealerships that we have. So we have to be more efficient because they are in lands that are very expensive. So you have to reduce the sales floors, and also to be in line from what is going on in terms of being competitive with the US and with Canada in terms of prices.
Right.
So there are different factors, but at the same time, I think we have to go through the same objective.
Right, and talking about prices that you were saying, that takes me to the next question, Gerardo, if you'd like to help us out here. So we've seen companies like Carvana here in the US, and also some other competitors like Eurán and many other local ones. In Mexico specifically and Latin America, there's an example of Kavak that they have really made a lot of progress in selling cars online, like completely a digital experience, let's say. And how can the car brick and mortar dealerships compete with those? And do you think this is like a trend that will continue? I mean, will the car dealerships evolve into online applications and businesses like Carvana or Kavak?
Well, basically, what we have to identify here is that the market is changing, and we need to adopt new technologies, as we mentioned initially. And if you can just, I bring just a slide that we were just looking at a moment ago. Yeah, and I want just to punctualize a little bit the relevance that has the digital process now. I mean, brick and mortar dealers are going to still there, but the business model is going to change. And how fast the dealer can adopt all these activities in every step, because maybe everybody going to say we are digital because we are answering by text. We are digital because we have a web page. But how our customers are being serviced through the digital way, right? And now every customer needs different approaches, even though it's digital. So we have to have this flexibility in all our activities. Maybe some dealers are looking just for inventories. They are looking for details of the vehicle. Others are looking for the finance options that we can just go through. But how we can make it easier for the customer, that's the key thing. And as I mentioned, we are changing, and the dealers need to change at the pace the market needs.
But I mean, these new companies, are they making it easier then? I mean, that's why they're successful?
Totally, they base their model in make it easier for the customer, the way of approaching to buy cars. So Carvana, you can just ask for a quote, and now they go and pay you your house, right, here in the US, right? There's advertising all over the internet as well as on TV. And it's important that this model, for example, Kavak, is very, very focused on the used vehicle market. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing new that the dealers can make. I mean, what they say is they facilitate the service for the customer to sell their used vehicle and to buy a new one with some warranty. The dealers do that, but somehow they don't pay attention in the unit in this business unit as far as the Kavak business is just focusing in how we can serve the dealer, the customer service, and how we can facilitate. At the end, they are offering the same thing, but it's make it easier. So they are winning the battle on that over the dealers, but the dealers, they don't understand that they can offer the same thing. Right. And at the same time, maybe the inventories that they are managing are affected by the situation right now, but the consumer is getting something different that it resonates with them and what they are looking for. And again, the younger customers more. And in this slide, you will see that we have just to identify in which areas Carvana and Kavak are offering an additional benefit to the customers, but the dealers can identify in which ones they can be really, really strong, maybe not in all of them, and on the service side. And as you mentioned, these new apps are, because everybody's just going through the app, it's easier for me. But now this is the business, and as you mentioned, the market cap that these companies are having are growing really, really fast because they can reach the reach that they can have against a dealer in a region, in an area that they are selling is totally different. So it's a big opportunity. If we move to the next slide that I have here, I just want to point out a lot on another point of view is how the customers are different. The younger customers, if you see this chart, the younger generations are reporting more problems in their vehicles, are more demanding. And if we don't identify, and more demanding, sorry, on the technology side, actives that are affecting the consumer. So with that, this is key for us to identify what our customers want and how they want to have it. This is just really focused on the product side of the vehicle. So with that, you will see that we have to adapt our processes through technology, as these companies did in getting closer to the customers at any level, but the youngers are going to be more demanding in that, and we have to be there. Kavak and Carvana examples and are offering that. They identify that the customers want to be treated in a different process, facilitated for them, and they are capitalizing that. So,
and you mentioned one key issue is how customers identify specific problems like Bluetooth and technology and all that stuff. So if you want to jump into Stewart here, Carvana has an enterprise value of $63 billion right now, and they had a 5.6 billion revenue in 2020. Do you think this is sustainable in the long run, or will they face the problem of not getting service to their clients, to their customers, and therefore that's where the brick and mortar dealerships will come in? What do you think on that?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think you're highlighting one of the really dynamic parts of the industry as it's, and we'll see this, over the next several years, longer even, in terms of this transition that we do see. Because there's no question, in the Amazon world that we live in, more and more people are getting more and more used to being able to do everything online with their retail transactions, and you do see companies now, obviously like Carvana, who are pushing 100% online experience, and that clearly is appealing to a lot of people, more and more appealing to more people every day. And yet, on the other hand, we are talking about buying a vehicle, typically the second biggest investment that a person makes in their lifetime for most of us. So a lot of people are still going to want to experience that vehicle in person. They may want to complete some of these activities online, for sure, but many of them are still going to want to have a test drive. In some cases, that may be at home with a take-home test drive scenario, but in a lot of cases, that will still be at the dealership. So there absolutely is still a place for dealerships moving forward. To Guillermo's point, as the market evolves, we may see more and more instances of showroom-only type of retail locations.
Okay.
But there's still, also to Gerardo's point, there's still going to be a need, obviously, for that vehicle service component to be available for customers as well. So I think that dealerships might be uniquely positioned, if they're progressive, to be able to offer customers the digital retail capabilities we see from some of these emerging companies, along with the in-person physical interaction opportunities as well. So I think there is an interesting place there, and I think we may touch on that point a little bit more when we talk about electric vehicles a little bit further into the discussion.
And that takes me to the next question, and I think you're the guy to answer that.
Can I make a brief comment on that regard?
Sure, Guillermo.
I think the very fast. The issue in Kavak, when it started in Mexico, we had a lot of discussions with the dealers that if they were a fair competition or it was not a fair competition. And some dealers thought that they were doing some things wrong and that we had to work with the authorities, that was not a fair game. No? So after these 4 or 5 years that they have been in the market, they have to comply with the different regulations in the same way that the dealers do. So the conclusion that we have in the association is that the dealers, knowing that the used car market is growing and that they, considering also the situation of the chips that we may talk a little bit later, that they have to be competitive. So we are a very competitive market with more than 43 different brands, and the used market of the dealers cannot be subject to these very big margins in the buy and sale. Kavak has been reducing that, increasing its volume, and that is an area where I think the dealers have to be very, very competitive in order to maintain a market that is going up, and also to increase the financing of used cars, which is Kavak offering as well. And in some cases, probably it's not a totally online experience, but it's a revolutionary change in the way the used car market works in Mexico.
So we want to put it like in a positive note. You would say that companies like Carvana and Kavak then have made the market, the used car market, more efficient and more competitive. Is that right? Great.
It seems to me
That's great.
That's
great.
That is the point.
Yeah.
The margins, they have reduced the margins, and the dealers have to do that because in the current model that is changing, and we'll talk about that. The very high margin was in the used cars in the dealerships. Now, with the volume that these new companies are doing, they have to be more aggressive and competitive. No?
Right. So let's talk about electric cars now that Stewart was talking about that earlier. And I have some data from experience saying that from 2020 to 2021, it has been a 118% increase of electric vehicle sales in the US. So right now it's around 2.5% of the total sales regarding EVs. How do you see this in the future? Do you think the US market will have this type of exponential increase in sales for EV cars? And we can also talk about hybrids, but specifically EVs in the future. How do you see this, Stewart?
Yeah, you're spot on with that. The current share that we're seeing. If you look specifically at retail, EVs do now make up in the States roughly about 3% of retail sales. And, to a lot of people that sounds like a small number, but to your point, Jorge, on the increase we've seen, that number was only 2% 1 year ago. So, it's already up a full percentage point, which is, as most of us know on this call, is a big deal in terms of share within the industry. So in the span of just a year, it's gone up that much, despite all of the challenges that we're talking about with COVID and chip shortages, inventory depletion. So I think that is a pretty good barometer of how the EV paradigm shift is underway. This is going to happen. And I think most people do realize that we're still very much in the early days of this. If you look at the product options on the market in the States right now, in the mainstream, you have Nissan Leaf, you have Chevy Bolt, admittedly with a lot of safety campaign issues they're dealing with right now. You have other vehicles like the Hyundai Kona, the Kia Niro. On the premium side, you have Audi e-tron, you have Porsche Taycan, Volvo and Polestar have vehicles on the market now. BMW i3 is still on the market for the time being. And then, of course, we have the Tesla models. And Tesla does deserve credit for effectively reinventing the EV space and pushing the envelope in a number of other ways too. But relative to the number of ICE vehicle equivalents out there available for purchase, the number of EV options right now for customers is still quite limited. I mean, yeah, outside of that group that I just mentioned, really the only kind of major new vehicle launches for EVs have been the Ford Mustang Mach-E and the VW ID.4. So all of these other vehicles, these electric vehicles that we know are coming, everything from the Ford F-150 Lightning to the Nissan Ariya, GMC Hummer EV, and many, many more, though all of those vehicles are still on the way.
Okay.
Rivian just started production of their pickup truck, the R1T, which was good to see. But speaking of Rivian and the F-150 Lightning, for some, even the Cybertruck, those vehicles in particular really highlight this point I'm making, that one of the key reasons we haven't yet seen more widespread adoption of electric vehicles is just because there haven't been enough product options out there for customers, especially in these critical segments like pickup trucks. Right. And we see this in the research, in the terms of the types of vehicles people are driving right now. Pickup truck drivers have the largest ratio of EV rejection in terms of purchase consideration among all of the major vehicle type segments. And that's largely because there's no pickup for them to buy in the electric space yet. And pickups made up 16% of the market in the US last year. So it's going to be very interesting to see how these these electric pickups do when they hit the market in this very big segment that up until now has basically been untapped. So I think that's a big piece of it, just bringing more products to market that people want. But to get EV adoption on a flight path toward those more loftier forecasts that we're seeing 10 years out, there's a lot of other critical things that need to happen. Obviously, there's a lot of investment and resources being poured into battery technology, improving battery performance, even the manufacturing efficiency around batteries and consolidating the sourcing of the raw materials. I'm sure some of the suppliers in the audience are involved directly with this part of it, but that is a critically important part of the equation, obviously, not just in terms of range performance, but also a price parity to the ICE vehicle equivalents. If we're able to get batteries to that point in terms of performance and price and cost, that will effectively neutralize two of the biggest objections to EVs that people have, which is price and range. You also have the public charging infrastructure that needs to be significantly more built out. And not just for long haul scenarios to get from one city to the next, but also within those populated areas themselves. Fully 1/3 of EV rejectors right now say that one big reason why they're not considering an electric vehicle is because they cannot charge it at home, where they live or where they work. Right. So there's a real need to build out more charging capabilities for people who do live in multi-unit dwellings or just otherwise don't have access to a dedicated parking space or garage where they can maintain their own private charger. But kind of as a final comment on this, I think there's an even more immediate opportunity for automakers and especially retailers, for dealers, to increase purchase consideration for electric vehicles, which is just overcoming this very large lack of information and experience out there among everyday shoppers. Right. EV purchase consideration among people who have just ridden in an electric vehicle, not owned one or even rented one, literally just sat in one. It's 3 times higher than it is for people who have never been in an electric vehicle before. And a lot of people, fully half of the people in our study in the States, have in fact never been in an electric vehicle, had no in-person experience with them. So getting, for retailers to afford opportunities to customers to get in these vehicles through take-home test drives and ride and drive events and things of that sort will demystify this new technology for them and really, allow them to enjoy the new technology, the performance. I think a lot of people have no idea how exhilarating the instant acceleration can be in an electric vehicle if they've never been in one. And not to mention that those touch points give retail personnel the opportunity to talk to shoppers about the benefits of owning an electric vehicle and being able to charge it like your phone every night while you're asleep and basically wake up with the equivalent of a full tank of gas every single morning. So those are some of the things that I think are big opportunities right now for retailers to take advantage of.
Thank you, Stewart. And you were talking about trucks, and we have the new Tesla Jaga, Texas facility being built for the Cybertrucks. So we're very short on time, but I know Guillermo has some slides regarding the EV vehicles and also Gerardo. So if you want to, just briefly, Guillermo, introduce your slide and your comment, that would be great, because we're short on time, right?
No, we have questions from the audience.
Yeah, well, actually, I don't have a slide, but I would mention briefly that with no doubt that's the tendency, and in Mexico we have been seeing also very important growth in the amount of hybrid, basically. I think the electric cars that were sold last year in Mexico, they didn't reach 300 cars. And that is something that we are certain that that's the path where we have to transit in the future. And the issue here is what a lot of things have been mentioned already. First of all, the cars are still very expensive. We don't have enough infrastructure for recharging around not even in Mexico City. And imagine inside the country, we still are lacking a lot of infrastructure. Okay. And the other point is something that we have been working with the government, is in order to have the correct incentives that are very relevant in order to put people in a more easy way, as saying that way, to try to buy a car. They are interested in those. Tesla has been selling some cars here in Mexico. Still, it's a very small amount of people who can afford that, and also, well, the cost of the battery and some other things. But as we can imagine, now it's the term of electric, but there may be other clean energies in the future. For example, hydrogen generation, which may be also available at some point. As you know, also the Formula One wants to have a fuel with zero net carbon emissions. Now they are proving that for the F1, right. And probably in the future other alternatives that are carbon free. But in Mexico, it's very, very, very small the amount of electrics. The hybrids a little bit more. There are some models, as was already mentioned. But that's the way we are going. But it's going to take some more time in our case in order to be affordable and in order to convince the government and also the OEMs to give incentives to these potential buyers of the EVs.
Thank you, Guillermo. Bruce, do we go to the audience questions?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, we have some really good questions from the audience about what you guys have been talking about. Stewart, you talked about in your remarks about that consumers are buying more of the kind of add-on products when they have them available digitally for them to look at. Why do you think they're buying? Why are they buying more products when they have digital info? Does it say something about the in-person dealership experience?
Yeah, I think generally what we are seeing, kind of the dynamic that's playing out and leading to those higher close rates is similar to what we see in terms of the positive benefits of digital retail for customers in general, which is that it allows them the convenience to learn about these products and to digest this information on their own in a very comfortable setting. Also, at their own convenience whenever they like. So I think that's a big component that's playing into it, is just the ability to kind of review that information, soak it in, make sense of it on their own time. They still obviously have all the opportunities that they might want or need to reach out to the dealership for specifics. And in a lot of cases, depending on whether they actually finalize the transaction in person at the store or with the dealership, they're still going to have some face-to-face communication and interaction with the dealership around F&I products and services. But I think generally it's the ability to consume them on their own time, at their own convenience, at a high level of comfort that's leading to ultimately those higher engagement levels and the higher penetration that we see there. So I think that's really the takeaway, is providing that transparency to customers is not a bad thing. I think historically, some of us may have viewed that as being a leverage point that dealerships need to hold on to. In this day and age, what we're seeing is the more transparent the experience is, the more satisfying it can be for the customer, the more likely they're going to be to engage with some of those additional purchase activities.
Very good, thank you. Gerardo, you put up your slide about all the different parts that have to be digitized. And how challenging is it for dealers to make that complete digital transition?
It's an easy answer, a lot. Basically, what they have to do is a big change of mind in order just to become really, really digital. And that's a challenge that they have to embrace and move forward. Because if not, they're going to just lagging behind on the system, and the new customers are not going to consider it. So if they don't move faster, if they don't make that effort soon, they're going to just stay behind, because what is going to happen, the business model is going to evolve in terms of selling vehicles, and suddenly there are some brands now like Tesla that are just delivering directly to the customer. So the new customers are going to see, like Stewart mentioned about the Amazon model, right? So you ask and you get it with no effort at all, right? So just money on it, on the transaction. And with that, we have to make it easier for the customers. And if the dealers just consider that because we have here the big facilities and we are not giving any big difference that makes sense for the customer, they're not going to come to buy. So maybe the model is going to change into a delivery process for the dealer. That's it, or send it to the house of the owners. So that's a big challenge that the dealers are going to have, and the business model are going to evolve. So if you don't embrace this big change, you're going to be lagging behind on what is happening in the market.
It's traditionally always been a person-to-person process.
And that is really important. That is going to have to continue, and this enhance the person, the relationship. You know, we have CRM since 20 years ago or more, and now there are stressing the system on the CRMs in order just to become more physical. I mean, when you go and service your vehicle, you want somebody to give you a face, and that will start the relationship and continue the relationship to create retention and loyalty of the customer and business. So that the business has to be more focused now on the service side than on the selling part. But both has to just continue evolving, supporting on technology.
Very good, thank you. Guillermo, we feel your pain. Your discussion of the challenges that you're facing are real, and they're serious. Couple questions for you. When the sales stores were closed early in the pandemic, were the service sections still open?
Yes, exactly. The service stores were open, and they were considered essential. And this was there were very difficult moments during that period because there was no certainty what the government was going to do. And so the service and the parts were open. What were closed for almost 4 months were the sale floors. Even though and that's the breaking point, I would say, is when the dealers, even though they were starting to make digital sales, that accelerated and became a priority for them in order to maintain some sales. So the first initial expectations that we thought that closing the sales force was going to be a decline, for example, in April and in May of around 70 and 80% down, the market went down like 60 or 50%, which is a lot, no? And the other is that the expectation that we have, taking into consideration the effects of that month, and also what we are seeing, even though the expectation that we have during this year is to have an increase of around 10 or 12%. We are not going to recover the levels, not saying the 1.6 million cars that were sold in 2016, but to get back to 2019, we think that is going to come at the end of 2023 and probably the beginning of 2024.
Guillermo, what was the reasoning the government was using to justify the legalization of bringing scrapped vehicles from the U.S. to Mexico?
That's a good question.
That's a very good question. Since 1979, we have had 19 legalization programs. All of them have failed in their intention. The issue is totally politically when the change in government is going to take place, and basically when the governments in the border are going to change. So there's a lot of pressure. These cars are bought in $400 and are sold in the highway with no regulations, with no papers, totally illegal, and people know that. They are used by criminals and drug dealers, and so the dealership, the formal dealers have to comply with a lot of things. They don't do that. And bringing those cars is totally a political decision, which is very hard to attack.
Yes, yes.
Because there are a lot of interests there, no?
Yeah. Stewart, you're going to get the last word here. Excuse me, Guillermo. Stewart, you're going to get the last word here. I don't think we can talk about the dealership system without talking about Tesla. And Tesla has sold all its vehicles without dealerships. Will they be able to continue this model?
Yeah, so You're spot on. Tesla has, despite a lot of challenges and headwinds with that direct-to-consumer approach that Elon Musk put forth, clearly it has taken hold, and they've been very successful with the approach. Now, having said that, I think this is really going to be kind of the fascinating part, is moving further into the future with and kind of seeing how the EV market evolves, as we talked about, and we start to see a lot of other vehicle options out there for customers who are interested in electric vehicles, vehicles that are not Teslas. It will be very interesting to see how the sales trending tracks, and because on the one hand you have a direct-to-consumer model like Tesla puts forth that is very compelling and appealing to a number of customers who are just looking for a very efficient transaction and want to be able to do a build-to-order type of scenario and have that vehicle delivered to your house. A lot of those people so far definitely fall into the early adopter camp, and they're kind of comfortable with that approach and doing it that way. But as you look at the broader marketplace and the kind of the much larger existing car park out there and ownership base, much of which vast majority are people who are driving around in ICE vehicles still, that will need to go through this transition phase and get more comfortable with the product. And, I think, as we talked about earlier, that's where I think we're going to see some really interesting things play out in terms of that unique opportunity that a lot of franchise dealerships have, in that they are able to offer a digital retail online transaction to customers and a full in-store experience, if that's so desired, especially around the points that we were talking about, how critical it is for a lot of customers to be able to experience these vehicles firsthand in order to consider actually purchasing them. It's a very new technology to the vast majority of customers out there, and they're telling us in the data they really kind of, we see higher purchase consideration when they can get in the vehicles themselves. So, no doubt Tesla has been very successful. I certainly, would expect that to continue to be the case. But I do think the full line automakers with their franchise dealerships have a really great opportunity as well to leverage both sides of that equation, the in-person and the online, as they're introducing these new vehicles to customers.
Very good. Thank you very much, Stewart. And thank you very much to our panel, Jorge and Gerardo and Guillermo. Thank you very much. And let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you.